Good morning, TNT, and welcome back to PSA TV. This is the Wake Up Call segment. I'm Avalon Williams. Thanks for joining us. We have on the phone line with us this morning, he is the General Secretary of NATUC and also the President of SWWTU, Mr. Micheal Annisette. Mr. Annisette, good morning.
Yeah, pleasant morning to you and the listening public.
Yes, I know you're out of the country, so we may have a bit of disconnect with our phone lines.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Right, I didn't get...
Actually, supposed to be at my conference hall at this moment, but I may call my opportunity and to take why give a few minutes of my time.
Yeah. I know, Mr. Annisette, NATUC had a conference here at the PSA rooftop, and we didn't get time to discuss that. My question to you this morning regarding that conference, because, I've been asking persons as well, did you see a sort of unity? Would you say you saw a sort of unity out of this whole situation with Mr. Watson Duke at the conference, which took place on Sunday?
Well, you will stay, and I'll continue to stay. A lot of people express unity here, the trade movement, like that, or united front. But I also wish to point out to them that may be so, but conversely, in several countries there are several different federations. The issue is whether or not federation will move around issues that affect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. When the affect
Mr. Annisette, I think we're getting a little distraction there with the telephone. Mr. Annisette? Mr. Annisette, I think we're not hearing you clearly, though. I think it's your location.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you now. We're gonna toss a short break and try to work out the technical difficulties with the phone line, and we're gonna come back with this interview with Mr. Annisette. Good morning and welcome back to PSA TV. We just had a slight difficulty there with the phone line. So on the phone with us this morning is the General Secretary of NATUC, Mr. Micheal Annisette. Mr. Annisette, are you hearing us now?
Yes, I am.
Right. So you were just telling us. Right. So we were just talking about the conference that took place on Sunday.
Yeah.
Question before, if you have seen a sort of unity, this conference has brought a sort of unity with what has transpired with Mr. Watson Duke.
Yeah, well then you would have seen a cross section of social activists of different social groups from different callings coming together on a common issue, and as I always attempt to point out that the issue is not Watson Duke, but the issue is the basis of the law that was used to frame charges against Watson Duke, which has its origin in the 31st century, where the Queen and the King, and the so-called, well, we call them 1% in Trinidad and Tobago now, but they were the 1% there, where they couldn't have done any wrong, and where what they say was divine, and they were considered gods, and therefore minors like me and you, all right, and people who we call the lower people from the social strata of the society, all right, could not express any view contrary or critical to the monarch, and that is the genesis of the law, and I'm therefore in a country that has 57 years independence. And coincidentally, Comrade Duke was charged on the eve of our independence. I believe that that is a disgrace. I think is a slap in our face for our leaders, African brothers from India and from the Caribbean region. All the Michael Manleys, the Eric Williams, and all the other leaders, the Mary Shaws and them, who would have fought against colonialism, who would have fought for the independence and the right for us as a people to chart our own destiny, to reenact that law, to charge as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago is rather unfortunate. It is regrettable, and it demonstrates in my mind a lack of appreciation of the context of the law and where we are as a people in the 21st century. And the question that I will continue to ask is, don't we understand our history? And are we a people of a lesser God, as the colonial masters used to think of us? And therefore, any enactment of that law is a demonstration of your lack of appreciation for our history, our people, and our foreparents.
Mr. Annisette, I know NATUC has been pushing this whole protest, the demonstration as well, with the Sedition Act. What is next, though? What is next for NATUC?
We are conversing and strategizing as I speak to you in terms of how we continue to educate the population. And I would have said that if we have to go to the north, east, west, and south, as NATUC, we will do that, because I think the issue of education, I think the issue of knowledge, I think the issue of allowing people to understand the basis of our objections, and it's contrary to what would have been articulated by the government. It has nothing to do with the law also remove all the laws. I think that kind of narrative is an insult to our intelligence, and therefore we want to reassure the public. Let me put it this way, that this is not a 9-day wonder, because there is a tendency in Trinidad that we start something and we forget it until we jump on the other issue. But this is an issue that we have to pay particular attention to in the light of several issues that we would have had to protest against. We would have had to protest against the Freedom of the Information Act, where there was attempts and efforts by the government to dilute the very act. All right, and then there was the Cypress Spade Act, where again there was a pushback because there was an encroachment in our view, on some of the fundamental rights that citizens must enjoy in a modern, constitutionally democratic society. So the issue is about freedom. The issue is about recognizing that the politicians are not gods. The politicians are not Messiah. The politicians are not people who can take the rod and part the Red Sea. The politicians are human beings just like you and me, and the politicians work for us, and it's not the other way around. So the whole question of democracy, which is the right to express our views, which is guaranteed in our Constitution, must be respected. And therefore, we see it as a contradiction as far as NATUC is concerned, and many other persons who would have spoken on Sunday. And let me take this opportunity to thank everybody who would have come out to lend support. It was an initiative of NATUC, but we got overwhelming response, and it speaks volumes in my mind, because one has to remember we had the cricket in Trinidad and Tobago, and people decided that what is happening with this Sedition Act is more important than cricket, and they came out and lent support in their hundreds, which is, I think, is a positive sign, which is something that we have to harness, which is something that we have to grow in the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago. because, as I will continue to say, democracy is about freedom. Democracy is about ideas. Democracy is engaging respectfully each other and debating the kind of society that we want. And I'm saying that there's a lack of that, and therefore the Sedition Act has given us an opportunity to reinvent the wheel and start a new approach in terms of what kind of Trinidad and Tobago that we want. A Trinidad and Tobago that is homegrown, a Trinidad and Tobago that is structured based on our views and our thinking, our culture, our society, and meets our needs. Not a Trinidad and Tobago is still rooted in the colonial past.
Ms. Annisette, I know you have also reached out to the regional and international bodies in support of this Sedition Act. Have you gotten any sort of responses yet?
Yeah. Well. I am in Rio, in Brazil right now as I speak to you, and that issue is up for discussions today.
Okay.
There are several trade unions from the Latin American and South American Caribbean region who are participating in this conference, and that is a subject that is up for discussions. Presenting the issues, I would have written them. They would have sent their support to us. The Caribbean Congress of Labor too would have sent letters of support on solidarity, and there are several other groups who is expressing their support for NATUC in our struggle to have this act repealed, because we are making this issue an international issue. Because, as I said in the conference, and several personalities would have articulated that several major countries would have repealed the act because they recognize that an act of that nature has no place in a modern society. And therefore, the question is if Trinidad and Tobago is moving forward, if we are building a new society, if we are building a culture that speaks to the 21st century, what are the requirements, why it is that we want to retain such legislation that has no place whatsoever in a modern society. And those are the issues, basically, and I want the population to understand. It's not about bashing the government, it's not about joke, but it's about a fundamental right of our people to be respected, given the historical antecedents that brought about the enactment of that particular legislation in Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Annisette, you have called on Mr. Nigel Henry to challenge him in a debate with a statement that he made, regarding people, where he said significant number of people believe the country would be better off without the trade unions.
Yeah, well, then, you see, when one lives in the 21st century, when one has a perspective of the history of Trinidad and Tobago and the world, when one looks at why the ILO was formed in 1919 after the World War I, to bring about what in 1919 they would have recognized social justice is critical to the development of any society. And where there isn't social justice, a society and the world will continue to be at loggerheads. And when we realize that the ILO is the only tripartite body, which is labor, business, and government coming together, to form resolutions to deal with labor issues, one will understand that the statement that has been made by the pollster is misleading, misdirected, and definitely lacks, as I say, intellectual hygiene. Because one has to ask yourself the question, who was responsible for the 40-day work week? Who was responsible for workers getting pension? Who was responsible for workers working overtime? Who was responsible for workers working 8 hours a day? Because in those days, workers would have had to work 14, 15, 16 hours a day. One has to remember in slavery time, workers had no hours of work. they wasn't paid, not 1 cent. And those are the situations that surround the trade union movement. And the trade union movement was formed by workers in order to defend their rights as workers in a society where we had the feudal system, when we had the monarchy, and now we have the 1% and a capitalist system that is failing, that speaks to I and not we. All right, and then we have what I want to call neo-colonialism that is destroying, all right, the world. Because when one look at the kind of filthy rich, and when one looks at in the 21st century that there are people who still working for under $1 a day, there are people who still cannot get food to eat. There are people who are still dying from diseases that you can cure in the morning. I mean, it raises some fundamental issues. And to say in that context that the trade union movement has done nothing but to convey that pressure is a misrepresentation in the widest sense of the word, of the facts and the reality that exists. Apparently, he's not a student of history, and it raises serious questions in my mind, right? That if somebody comes up with that in a poll, it raises questions in my mind in terms of the education of our people of Trinidad and Tobago. And as I said, Micheal Bob Marley rather said, right, you have to free yourself from our mental slavery, because mental slavery is one of the acts that is used to keep you down the social strata, to see you less than a people, to see you as an inanimated object, and not as a people that is entitled to social justice. And this is what this is all about, you know. What I want to put something on the table, you know. Does this guy, Nigel, recognizes that women, right, in Chicago paid with their lives for the right to work? Does he recognize that? Does he recognize that in the 21st century, there are several countries that still have sweatshops? Does he realize that there are several big companies and brand name companies who use labor in Sri Lanka and all these depressed areas to produce shoes, pay these workers and them 50 cents, and then come back and sell that very shoe for over $1,000 and more? That is what is happening in our society, and therefore the point that I'm making, that the need for the trade union movement and the need for social activists to be ever so vigilant is more prominent, given the subtleties that is used by the 1% in order to circumvent the rights of workers in the world and globally.
Mr. Annisette, we do look forward to that debate with you and Mr. Nigel Henry there.
I will welcome it in the morning.
Yes, and we'll be glad to publish it here at PSA.
Because you see, it's a misrepresentation, and then it raises another question. Given our educational system, right, where our educational system doesn't speak to our realities and our history, you're going to have pollsters making those kinds of statements emanating from an interview that they would have made from personals who may not understand or who have not understand the history of the trade union movement in Trinidad and Tobago, in the region, which is the CARICOM region, and the world. Because if one understands that history, that statement will not be made. And so I'm also making a plug, therefore, that the teaching of trade union history in our schools has to be part of our now curriculum, given the fact that we must understand our history and we must appreciate our history. We must not only see our trade union leaders in the context of 1937, all right, where a policeman was burned. No, we must see it in terms of the broader economic perspective, so that we will be rooted in our history. We will have that in our minds, and nobody will be able to fool us with making statements that cannot stand scrutiny and cannot stand the test of time. History cannot change. The truth cannot change, Mr. Nigel. The truth will always be the truth. And no matter what effort is made to dilute, to diversify it, okay, it will remain the truth. And I want to remind him, that at one time, we as Africans, we were considered as less than human beings. We want human beings, all right? We want looked at as persons who have a mind of our own and a mind that we could think for ourselves. That is what was taught us.
Yeah. That
was a fact. That was taught us, and that was attempted to be instilled in our minds. I'm going to go into the history, which I don't want to go through, because the people know about Kintakute and his name. When they beat him, right? For him to give up his African name, we know they will have taken away our religion. We know that even our Baptist spiritual religion, it was a crime. You could not have preached by the wayside. Police used to lock you up. Those are the realities. Those are trade unions couldn't have preach or couldn't have say anything. They used to be charged for sedition. You see how we have how many trade unions and Calypsonians that were charged for sedition, and why they were charged. And now to come to a modern society where workers are enjoying guaranteed 8 hours work week, where workers are enjoying social protection, where workers have pensions, where workers have health plans. All right, come on. And a statement of that nature is made by someone who's supposed to be an intellectual. Oh, no.
Yeah,
no.
I want to...
God forbids that kind of narrative to be part of our history and our story as we move forward as a people and we build a better Trinidad and Tobago. That kind of statement has no place whatsoever in our narrative. It is misleading, it is counterproductive, and it's something that speaks to promotion, a PR that will want to continue to have the working class and the trade union movement viewed in a kind of light that we would not be able to stand up and defend our right in a capitalist society, which is necessary to have forces coming together, which is the trade union movement, as a balance against the powerful in any society. So the trade union movement has always been the countervailing force against the powerful and the rich. And as long as we have this kind of political system, as long as we have this kind of economic system where individuals takes precedence over the better good of the society and the country, we will always have the trade union movement as part of that society.
I want to thank you so much, Mr. Annisette, for taking this call.
I will welcome a debate with you on the bigger picture of the trade union movement and the role that we would have played to have Trinidad and Tobago where we are today in terms of the development stage from slavery, colonialism, and independence.
Thank you so much, Mr. Annisette, and we will keep in touch with you so we can hear what's happening over at your end with the conference you'll be attending soon. So thanks so much for this phone call.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the pleasure is always mine to exchange my ideas because, I have learned in my journey down here that, no one knows everything. It's the collective wisdom and the coming together of our minds, is debating ideas, is what takes our country forward. And all I'm simply attempting to do is to put the facts into the public domain and allow the people who hear the facts to make an independent decision based on their own analysis. That is the only way we can have true democracy in any country, when people are given all the facts and they are allowed to make their own judgment rather than allowing ideas to be forced into their mind so that they can think in a particular way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Annisette.
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right.
the pleasure is always mine.
Bye-bye. So we were just joined by a telephone call there with the General Secretary of NATUC, Mr. Micheal Annisette. He's actually calling on Mr. Nigel Henry to challenge him in a debate on a comment he made regarding the trade union movement. So we're going to toss a short break and come right back to the program.